referred to such a person who extensively fabricates the hadith. He makes a certain content and then refers this content to the Prophet ﷺ. And he falsely makes a chain of narrators as well. But there are muhaddithin who know each and everything. And in Islamic Sharia, when the Islamic State is established, when the constitution is of Quran and Sunnah, if such a person is found guilty of this particular offense, that he fabricates extensively hadith and then he acknowledges, he confesses. So it is his ulama agree that his punishment is capital punishment. Why? Because he is drafting a new constitution. Our constitution is Quran and Sunnah. When he is fabricating the Sunnah, fabricating the hadith, so it means that he is making a parallel state, state within state, constitution within constitution, which no any country of dunya will accept. So when Harun Rashid, he told him that now, you tell us that what are the ahadiths you have fabricated, so that we take them out. So he said, I will never do this. I can't do this. If you kill me, then what about those ahadiths which I have fabricated? Then Harun al-Rashid said, we don't worry about it. As long as we have the people like Abdullah ibn Mubarak. Abdullah ibn Mubarak was a great muhaddis. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them with this specific discipline of knowledge to protect the hadith part. As far as the Quran, the legal text of the Quran is concerned, the whole text of the Quran is concerned with a legal text for us. His protection responsibility has been taken by Allah. And then the protection of the hadith, it is upon the shoulders of the muhaddiseen. And they have done this meticulously. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have chosen them for this particular noble job, and they did it meticulously and to the best possible way. Then, so it means that Quran and Sunnah, Quran and Hadith together is known as definite law. So this is one part of the knowledge. And then as far as ahkam are concerned, when we see in the Quran, there are not more than 500 to 600 verses which are discussing the ahkam. Just there are around 6,600, more than 6,600 verses in the Quran. Only 500 to 600 verses are discussing about the ahkam. Most part of the Quran talk about the tawheed, various forms of the shirk, and then establishing the messengership, apostleship and messengership of the Prophet ﷺ, and also discussing about the qiyamah. These are the main discussions in the Quran. So far as ahkam or the rulings are concerned, just 500 to 600 verses are discussing the ahkam. And there have been many mufassirin, many commentators and many scholars who made the commentary upon the Quran, focusing upon only the ahkam part. Like there is Ahkam al-Quran, Abu Bakr al-Jassas, Qadi Abu Bakr al-Jassas is one of the earliest scholars who focused upon only those ayat, those verses which talk about the ahkam. And then there is Ahkam al-Quran, Lisabuni. There are many other, and there is At-Tafsirat al-Ahmadiyya, Mulla Ali Jiwan, rahimahumullah ajma'in. So they focused upon only such verses which talk about the law, which talk about the legal part of the Islam, all legal issues of the Islam. So in Quran, we find 500 to 600. In Hafiz ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says that when we see the whole structure of the hadith, and the hadith, there are in hundreds and thousands, there's no limit to it. And as far as these hundreds and thousands of ahadith are concerned, when we minutely find out that how many ahadith are directly talking about the rulings, the ahkam, there are not more than 4,000. There are not more than, so together the legal structure of Islam is based on 4,500 texts, we can say, 4,500 articles. So this is known as definite law. But there are, we can say, the millions of the ahkam. Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi rahimahullah, one of the great Shafi scholar, he says that there are more than 20,000 issues upon which whole ummah has the unity, has the consensus. There are more than 20,000 of ahkam which is known as ijma'. And ijma is when all the scholars of all four schools of thought agree. And there's not a single one who disagree with it. If there is a small group of scholars who disagree with it, then it is not known as ijma. It is known as majority opinion, jamhur. For any issue to be qualified as to be the issue of ijma, there must be the consensus of all scholars. And Abu Ishaq al-Shirazi says, rahimahullah, that as far as the ahkam of ijma are concerned, there are more than 20,000. Basic text of law, structure of law, only 4,500 or 4,600. For the sake of argument, it's only 5,000 articles only. And the ahkam of ijma, more than 20,000. So this is known as derived law. So when Quran and Hadith is made a base, and then ulama then make them ijtihad on the basis of Quran and Sunnah. And there are usul and dawabit, there are norms, rules and regulations for this ijtihad. It's not an open-ended exercise, legal reasoning. Rather, this legal reasoning must be on the basis of certain rules and regulations set by our predecessors, set by ourselves, our aslaf. And then they derive the law, and that law is known as derived law. So fundamentally now there are two types of law. One, which is defined law, and second, which is derived law. As far as ilmul faraid is concerned, it is wholly and solely defined law. So it means half of the knowledge. So that's how other scholars, they define the term nisful ilm, that it is a half of the knowledge. Why it is half of the knowledge? Because it does fall under the category of the defined law, which is a half of the knowledge. The rest of the half is the derived law. And there is no any, as I said before, that the entirety of ilmul faraid, in its entirety, it is based on the defined law, which is mentioned in the Quran. And there are some few aspects or some ahkam which are mentioned in the Sunnah. Most of the ahkam regarding the faraid are mentioned in the Quran. It's for this reason, Robert Crane is still alive, and if I'm not mistaken, last month, just around last month, he had a lecture, online lecture in our university, International Islamic University, Malaysia. Robert Crane, he was personal secretary of President Nixon of America, and he has 2 PhD. He's a law expert, he's a legal luminary. He has 2 PhDs in law, one in international law, second in public law. And he has been the president for the Law Society of Harvard for 3 years. He's one of the renowned legal personality all over the world. And he embraced the Islam. One of the reasons why he embraced the Islam was the beauty of the legal structure of Islam. It is so well structured that there is no any tradition. You will not find that this complex and rigorous mechanism of law will not find anywhere. And then the text is all, the domains are defined. What is derived, what is defined. What is revealed law and what is reasoned law. Which part is that we cannot say anything. We have to accept it, that they are known as constants of law. Then there are variables of law, which are flexible, where we can exercise our reason. So Robert Crane, when he studied the structure of, especially the law of inheritance, which moved him and which had a great impact upon his mind, that he realized that this law of inheritance, when he studied this, he embraced Islam, and he said that it is beyond the scope of the human imagination to put this rigorous discipline of knowledge in a few verses. And he says, I had a discussion with one of the Jewish scholars. He was also a legal expert of the law. I discussed with him, I was describing the beauty of Islamic legal structure. And he took it very lightly. He was not interested because he thought that Islam is just a cultural outcome of the Arabian society and nothing else. Then I asked him, Robert Crane says, I asked him that, have you gone through the law of inheritance in America? He said, yes, it's, I think not, if I'm not mistaken, it's in huge 8 volumes. So huge 8 volumes are discussing just the law of inheritance in one single country. Huge 8 volumes. He said, okay, if I show you a small, precise passage which encompasses the whole concept of the inheritance, then would you believe that it is the word of God? He said, deadly impossible. How can one small passage can encompass all the foundation of this particular discipline? Then he says, I just recited the Ayatul Mirath, the words of inheritance, which is mentioned in the Quran. When he translated this verse to him, he was quite astonished and baffled to see the beauty of this verse, that the foundation of inheritance, including its important details, are summarized in a beautiful, lucid, and short verse, which is known as Ayatul Miras. Then he said, yes, if it is mentioned in the Quran, it is the word of God. But for common people, they cannot understand these subtleties and these deep meanings. But for us, it's enough to understand what Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that it is half of the knowledge. So if a person learns the ilmul mirath, as if he learned half of the knowledge. And the knowledge, seeking the knowledge, as Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the path of knowledge is the path to Jannah. Man salaka tariqa, whoever adopts the path of knowledge, one of the narration says, yabtaghi bihi wajh Allah, through which he wants to earn the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sahhalallahu alayhi tariqan ila al-Jannah. Allah makes the path to Jannah easier for him. And there's another hadith which is on the authority of Sayyidina Abdullah ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu. He says, qala Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, that Rasulullah sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam said, ta'allamul Qur'an wa'allimuhu an-nas. You learn the Quran and teach people the Quran. And there's another hadith regarding this. خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَهُ. Best amongst you is the one who learns the Quran and teaches it to others. Then Prophet said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَتَعَلَّمُ الْفَرَائِدَ وَعَلِّمُوهَا. And you learn the faraid, you learn the law of inheritance. وَعَلِّمُوهَا. And you teach others this discipline of knowledge. فَإِنِّي إِمْرُؤٌ مَقْبُودٌ. Because I shall be taken away, means I am leaving this dunya. I cannot stay among you forever. And then Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wal ilmu marfu, and this discipline of knowledge will be also taken away. وَيُوشِكُ أَنْ يَخْتِلِفَ إِسْنَانِ فِي الْفَرِيدَةِ وَالْمَسْأَلَةُ فَلَا يَجِدَانِ أَحَدًا يُخْبِرُهُمَا. Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, therefore, that it is quite possible. Therefore, the twaddle will emerge until a conflict of two persons happens over the succession. There will be a property between the two people, and there will be no one to say to them how much portion belongs to you and how much portion belongs to other party. So they will have a conflict upon this, and yet there is not any person available to solve their problem. When this discipline of knowledge will be taken away, then there will be no one among you who can solve the problem. Actually, this is just close the actual occurrence of the Qiyamah. As Prophet ﷺ has indicated that before the actual occurrence of the Qiyamah, this discipline of knowledge will be taken away. And not only this, the start will be from this ilmul faraid. Then other ahkam will be also taken away. Taken away means that there will be no any scholar. As Prophet ﷺ, that yuqbadul ilmu, that the ilm will be taken away. Not directly from the hearts of the people, by the qabdil ulama, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take away the ulama. When there is no any alim, no any scholar, then there will be no one the people will refer to. People will ask regarding the hukum, regarding the rulings. And Sayyidina Huzaifa radiallahu anhu, he also narrated one of the hadiths of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, yadrusul Islam. Islam will fade away, kama yadrusu washya thawb. As the print of a garment, it fades away. When we bring a cloth which is colorful, after a certain passage of time, its colors or its print is getting faded away. Prophet ﷺ, likewise, Islam will fade away until a person will not be knowing what is salah and what is zakah. He will not be having even the knowledge about the salah and about the zakah. So this, however, this will be after the ilmul faraid is taken. The first thing which will be taken away will be this ilmul faraid. So we need to just learn this and teach others. There is another hadith which is narrated by Sayyidina Abdullah bin Amr radiallahu anhuma, أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال العلم ثلاثة. The entire body of knowledge can be divided into three parts. العلم ثلاثة. There are three disciplines of knowledge. وما سوى ذلك فضل. Whatever is other than those three disciplines of knowledge is just optional and supplementary. So fundamental disciplines of knowledge are three. He said, Ayatul Muhkama, the established verse of Quran, means the Quran. Or Sunnatul Qaima, or established Sunnah. So Quran, Sunnah, or Faridatul Adila, or just inheritance of law. So Quran, Sunnah, and inheritance of law. Prophet ﷺ, this is knowledge. Whatever is other than this, it is supplementary. وَمَا سِوَى ذَلِكَ فَضْلٌ. Whatever is other than this, that is supplementary. And Sayyidina Anas radiallahu anhu, he says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم, that Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم has said, أرحم أمتي بأمتي أبو بكر. The most compassionate of my ummah towards my ummah is Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. He's having the compassionate heart towards my ummah. وَأَشَدُّهُمْ فِي دِينِ اللَّهِ عُمَرَ. And the strong among them towards the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu. وَأَصْدَقُهَا حَيَاءً عُثْمَانَ. And most truthful in terms of modesty among them is Usman radiallahu anhu. وَأَعْلَمُهَا بِالْحَلَالِ وَالْحَرَامُ عَاذَ بْنُ جَبَلٍ. And the most knowledgeable about halal and haram, about lawful and unlawful, is Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhu. وَأَقْرَهُ لِكِتَابِ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ Ubay. And the most knowledgeable about the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala among them is Ubay ibn Ka'b radiallahu anhu. وَأَعْلَمُهَا بِالْفَرَائِضِ Zayd ibn Thabit. The most knowledgeable about the law of inheritance among them is Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu. وَلِكُلِّ أُمَّةٍ أَمِينٍ. And every community had a trustworthy person. وَأَمِينُ هَذِهِ الْأُمَّةِ أَبُو عُبَيدَةَ بْنُ الْجَرَّاحِ. And the trustworthy person of this ummah is Abu Ubaidah ibn Jarrah. So in this hadith, Prophet ﷺ said, Zayd ibn Thabit, he was among the Sahaba, was more knowledgeable regarding the issues of the inheritance, regarding the law of the inheritance. Zayd ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu. And as far as law of inheritance is concerned, or as far as this ilmul faraid or ilmul mirath is concerned, every discipline of knowledge has its own area of discussion. And the area of discussion of this discipline of knowledge is the left out property by a deceased person. So whatever he leaves behind, that's the main discussion of this particular discipline of knowledge. The area of discussion of fiqh is the issues of the fiqh. The area of discussion of ilmul hadith is to discuss about the hadith. And the area of discussion of this particular discipline of knowledge is the leftover property. Whatever property a deceased leaves behind, that's the main discussion of the discipline of knowledge. So our approach with the property in our life, and then after our life, after we die, after our death, what shall be done to this property? So this is the area of discussion of this discipline of knowledge. And then each and every discipline of knowledge has a specific objective, which is known as mawdu'ul ilm. So mawdu, or the objective of this particular discipline of knowledge, is giving the due and right share to the rightful owners and inheritors. So it is this discipline of knowledge which decides which inheritor shall get what amount or what portion. And what's the main source of this discipline of knowledge? It is Al-Quran al-Kareem. As I said before, that unlike other ahkam, like Salah, Zakah, Siyam, and Hajj, or the other ahkam, its details are not mentioned in the Quran. It's only the basic things, the foundational things are mentioned in the Quran. Details are found in the Sunnah. But this discipline of knowledge, most of its teachings are discussed by the Quran. Whether it is a foundational things or it is the details of this particular discipline, they're all mentioned in the Quran. So main source of this, what we call ilmul mirath or ilmul faraid, is Al-Quran al-Kareem. And then, as I said before, there are certain important things as well which are mentioned in the Sunnah, which we discuss inshallah later on. As I discussed before that the law of inheritance is not only found within the Muslim society or the Islamic Ummah. There are many other traditions of the world who have their own specific law of inheritance. But when we see that when we compare the Islamic law of inheritance with other traditions of the world, we find that the rahmah, the beauty of Islamic law of inheritance, that how beautifully and how rationally it has been distributed among the inheritors. And no one has been deprived unjustly. As other traditions, they were depriving other inheritors, other legal and due inheritors, they were depriving them of their due portion. But Islam has maintained the scales of the justice. As I said before that, the basic objective of the Sharia is to establish the justice in all walks of life, be it the personal life or the social life, or any other part of the life, any aspect or any domain of the life. The main objective of the Deen and Islam is to establish the scales of justice, to maintain them. So as far as the inheritance is concerned, inheritance in Islam is concerned, find that how beautifully each and every, either it is close or distant, close or remote relatives are concerned, everyone has been given its specific and due portion. And that's on the basis of scales of justice, as I said before. When we find that in most of the traditions of the world, in most of the traditions, women were deprived of this inheritance because they thought that woman, it is just a kind of, we can say, is a kind of chattel. It has no any human significance. Rather, it is considered to be like other goods. They were having the wealth, they were having the animals, they were having the assets. So they were considering the woman to be the part of their asset, to be the part of their wealth, to be the part of their goods, depriving the woman of its own specific status of being human being, of being human. So humanness was deprived, and not talk about giving the share in property or inheritance to the woman. Even in the Arabian society, this the same thing was there, that woman was deprived of the inheritance. And then in most of the traditions of the world, be it the Hungarian, Albanian, Romanian, Armenian traditions, Slavic traditions, Latin America, you find that the woman was fully, totally deprived of the inheritance. And also, when we see the Chinese this tradition, so predominantly they used to practice that the elder son of the family would get all the property, all the inheritance. So others were deprived of the property. So it was an unfair distribution of the property. So property, the devolution of property was not based on justice, rather their own custom, their own conventions. Though there was no any divine revelation behind that custom or tradition, but they used this, it was a statute, this was a norm in the society that the elder son was entitled to get all the property or major portion of the property in some traditions, whereas others were deprived. Others they were not given any portion from the wealth or from the property of the deceased. And then we also find in Indian context, civilization is spread over almost 5,000 years. So we find that the primogeniture, it was quite prevalent over there. Patrilineal primogeniture, it predominated in ancient times of the India. It means that the head of the eldest son of the family was getting all the property, others were deprived. The ancient laws in the ancient India is known as the law of Manu, state that the eldest son inherits all of the father's estate. So this patrilineal primogeniture concept of law was prevalent in most of the traditions of the world. And when we see about the Mongols, who created the havoc in the Islamic state in the medieval period, they usually stated that the younger son had a special position because he cared for his parents in their old age. On their death, he inherited the parental tent, which was connected with the religious cult in Mongol tradition. Though all sons received more or less equal shares of the livestock as they married, However, in contrast to this popularly held notion, more rigorous and substantiated anthropological studies of kinship and family in Central Asia people strongly indicate that in these societies, eldest sons and their lines of descent had higher status than younger sons and their lines of descent. And in also Central Asia, all members of a lineage were terminologically distinguished by generation and age, with senior superior to junior. So this is how they used the distribution of the wealth, how the devolution of property was practiced, and even among the Arabs. And we see the Arabian society, the tribal society, the Arabian society, pagan society, that the woman was totally deprived of the inheritance. And there was a rigorous, there was a norm or convention, or there was we can say the custom, selfish custom. They wanted to just concentrate the wealth within the tribe. For this, the selection of the bride and bridegroom would also take place. It is not that the people were free to choose their partners. Rather, it was the wealth which would decide the fate of one's spouse. Who could be one's spouse, depending upon the wealth, because they didn't want to give it to others. They want the concentration of the wealth within the tribe. And in this case, mostly the woman was deprived of the shares. And this was one of the reasons, there's a hadith, we discussed that later on, inshallah, that one of the Sahabi, he was martyred, and then he left behind a few daughters. And their uncles deprived them of their inheritance. They said, you are all women, you cannot get any share from the property of your father. So their mother, along with the children, came to the Prophet ﷺ, saying that my husband has been martyred, and now he left these daughters behind, and the uncles are denying the property to them. They say you cannot get any property according to the prevalent custom of the Arabs. So the woman was totally deprived of this property. So when we see the Islamic law of inheritance, we have to contextualize it. We have to position it and see what was the prevalent structure of inheritance all through the world, specifically in the Arabian context. How did they practice the devolution of property? How they distributed the wealth among the inheritors? Then we can realize the beauty of Islam. And also, when we see the maqasid approach of inheritance, then we realize that how beautifully Allah subhanahu, because this distribution is not based on ijtihad, as I said before. It's not the ijtihad of ulama. And even it is not mentioned in the sunnah. It's directly commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yusikumullahu fi awladikum. Allah commands you regarding your children. Then Allah gives a long list that which inheritor will get how much portion. So the command came directly from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's not a single person, there's no any scholar, group of scholars, even the Sahaba ridwanullahi ta'ala alayhim ajmeen, who decided this. So it was decided by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So after this event, when she came along with her daughters to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam remained silent, and Allah sent the wahyu. And what were the contents of the wahyu? We can, inshallah, discuss that later on. So here, my main focus is that when we compare the law of inheritance with other traditions, we find that there is unfair devolution of property. But in Islam, it's based on justice. But there are some people who are confused that, okay, in Islam, woman gets only one share, whereas the man gets the 2 shares. It's quite injustice. It's an apparent thing. Those who have the lack of knowledge, they will develop misconceptions. It's not only about this issue, regarding all the disciplines of the knowledge. If a person is having the lack of knowledge, then he will find that there are so many confusions. It's messed up. Any student of knowledge, student of physics, if he's not aware about the fundamentals of the physics, when he studied the Newton, he'll say, oh, Newton is saying something different, something else. Einstein is saying entirely different. Newtonian model of physics and Einsteinian model of physics. There are 2 different models of physics. And then quantum physics and the conventional physics. Einstein totally disagreed with this. So if a person who is not having all knowledge of physics, he will develop many confusions. You say Einstein is saying something, Newton is saying something, Hawking is saying something, Stephen Hawking. Heisenberg is saying something. Rutherford is saying something. So it is all mess, it's all confusion, but you will not find any the devoted discipline of physics, disciple of physics who develop this, because he studies all these things in a structured way. There's a methodology to understand all these differences. Then he places the difference in its appropriate position. Likewise, ilmul miraf. Some people say, okay, what about the grandchild? He's deprived of the property if his father dies and his grandfather is still alive. Actually, those who don't have the knowledge, they develop these misconceptions, and we are going to discuss this inshallah at length in this course, that when Islam says, okay, this much portion for the male, this much portion for the female, what is the hikmah behind it? And what are the different, we can say, aspects, important aspects connected to that particular issue. And then it will become clear to us that this distribution of devolution of property, this distribution of wealth in the Islam is quite based on the justice. That there is no injustice, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Prophet sallallahu Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that I have made a dhulm haram upon me, so I have made it haram upon you as well. So when Allah has made the dhulm haram upon us, na'udhu billah, na'udhu billah, na'udhu billah, how he can commit the dhulm? So it is actually the lack of knowledge, lack of understanding of deen, that we develop such confusions. So we'll discuss them inshallah, many other issues later on. And now we discuss about the socio-economic significance of inheritance. What is the socio-economic importance of the inheritance in Islam? Actually, the law of inheritance in Islam is based upon 5 main considerations. Firstly, to break up the concentration of wealth in individuals and separate out in society. As I said before, that the tribal society of Arabia, they wanted to maintain and concentrate the wealth within the tribe. That's why even the choice of marriage was not based upon the one's own desire. It depended upon the wealth, how much the tribe had the wealth. So it depended upon it. So they would find the way. And on the basis of this thing, they would end. So we can say, so endogamy was more prevalent. Endogamy means the marriage within the tribe, within the community, or within the particular caste. The reason was concentration of the wealth. As innahu lihubbil khayri la shadid, as I mentioned before, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that the human being's love for the wealth is quite intense. So he wants to accumulate this and they want to concentrate this. By framing the law of inheritance, Islam has abolished this thing. Islam has destroyed this concentration of wealth. Rather, it must be transferred to the legal inheritors, to the legal legatees. So this was the first reason, to break up the concentration of the wealth in individuals and spread it out in the society. And second important significance of law of inheritance is to respect the property right of ownership of an individual earned through honest means. If a person is making his efforts, he puts all his efforts honestly and through the lawful means, then he accumulates the wealth, then he must be the proprietor of this, owner of this particular property. As in, if you study deeply the Communist Manifesto of Karl Marx, he said the private property is a root of the evil. That's why in his Communist Manifesto, he totally disagreed with the law of inheritance. He said inheritance must be abolished. All the property must be owned by the state. And when we see the history of the present, the emergence of the communist states, especially the USSR, the China, the Cuba. So if we discuss the law of inheritance, though they could not abolish it outrightly because they couldn't do this, is a hardwired, well-established institution in the society which cannot be removed and thrown away in one go. However, they structured the law their own way, the communist law, in a way that they decrease the importance of the inheritance. Because their goal was, as Marx in his Communist Manifesto, he gives many steps. How can we abolish the inheritance? But Islam, it respects the private property. In communism, in socialism, it's against the concept of private property. But Islam, it encourages a person. It it safeguards the right to property. However, this, as I said before, that to earn this property is responsible and answerable before Allah. But how did you earn this? So there should be no injustice, there should be no exploitation, there should be no any means of dishonesty used to accumulate the wealth. There should be no riba, there should be no bribery, there should be no any snatching away from others, deceiving others, deception. Most of the business industry is based on now deception. The advertisement they show the product with the high quality, which is totally against the basic quality, basic product. So they garner the deception. So that's why Prophet ﷺ, At-Tajir Saduq, a truthful trader shall be gathered with the messengers on the day of judgment. At-Tajir Saduq. So Islam encourages, Islam appreciates, Islam allows the ownership of right to the property, but at the same breath lays certain rigorous and important norms that a person must observe, because Allah will ask him on the day of judgment, how did you earn your wealth? And then second question regarding the wealth, وَفِيمَ أَنْفَقْتَ, in what causes you spend your wealth, in what ways you spend your wealth. And the third and important significance of law of inheritance in Islam is to hammer in the consciousness of a man the fact that man is not the absolute master of wealth he produces, but it is trustee and is not therefore authorized to pass it on to others as he likes. To realize, to make us acquainted with this feeling, with this realization that whatever I possess, it's not fundamentally my own. I'm the trustee of this, it's an amanah with me. And this amanah I shall be asked about. Allah will ask me regarding this amanah. So a person is not allowed, okay, this much share to this son or to this daughter, this much share. He's not allowed to do this. Rather, the distribution of shares and portions have been decided and have been commanded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself. So to make us realize that nothing belongs to us in essentially. Nothing belongs to us fundamentally. It's all a trust given to us. Because we can realize this, we can see the people who own huge estates. When they die, what's along with them? Nothing except the three things which Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, إِذَا مَاتَ الْإِنسَانُ إِنْقَطَعَ مَالُهُ إِلَّا مِنْ ثَلَاثٍ. So we cannot take along anything except his amal. And amal, they are latent. It's not something which you can see. So alone we came, alone we go, except with the amal. So this is the law of inheritance in Islam, making us aware about this reality that you are the caretaker of this wealth, this property for a specific period of time. Then you shall be asked about it. And the fourth and important thing, to consolidate the family system, which is the social unit of an Islamic society. As we know that the basic unit of society is the family. To ensure the well-being of the family, there must be the equitable, there must be the justified distribution of the wealth. The wealth of the person who passes away. In this Islam, how he consolidates the position. And if a person tries to deprive if a person tries to deprive any of his legatees, any of his inheritors, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah will deprive him from the inheritance of Jannah. If a person is having many legatees, many inheritors, and he wants to deprive some of his legatees, some of his inheritors, Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah will deprive him of the inheritance of the Jannah on the day of judgment. As Allah says, "Ola yarithun al-firdaus." They will inherit the Jannah. So as I said in the beginning, forms of the inheritance in the Quran, our inheritance which is going to be along with us all along our life in Akhirah. That's an inheritance of Akhirah, inheritance of Jannah. And those who deprive their legal inheritors in dunya, they'll be deprived of the inheritance of the Akhirah, inheritance of the Jannah. And then to give incentive to work and encourage economic activity as sanctioned by Islam. So these are the important socio-economic significance of inheritance in Islam. And finally, we talk about the reformative measures of Islam regarding the law of inheritance. So Islam introduces so many reforms in the law of inheritance, which can be succinctly summed up as follows. Firstly, it defined and determined in clear-cut terms the share of each inheritor and imposed limits on the right of the property owner to dispose of his property according to his whim and caprice. It's not, as I said, a person cannot say, okay, it was my efforts, my energy, my wealth, my time, my everything that accumulated this wealth, then I can just distribute it the way I wish. He cannot. He has to follow the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it made the female who had been previously thought a chattel, the co-sharer with the male, and thus not only resorted her dignity, but safeguarded her social and economic rights. As I said before, that in many traditions of the world, she was totally deprived of the property. In many other traditions, she was not even considered to be the human being. She was considered to be a chattel, just a stuff along with the animals and other things. But Islam restored her dignity. And again, the question is, many of us may be thinking about this question: why man is getting two and woman one? This is one of the main misconception which is circulating among the Muslim society, among the Muslim minds. So we address this inshallah when we discuss about the appropriate shares of the inheritors. There we discuss it, the hikmah behind it, and important things which are connected to this. And then it laid the rules for the breakup of the concentrated wealth in the society and helped in its proper and equitable distribution among a large number of persons, as I discussed this before also. And it gave a death blow to the law of primogeniture and thus provide a democratic basis for the division of the property of the deceased. As I said, most of the cultures and traditions of the world, they practice the primogeniture. Primogeniture refers to the concept that the eldest son of the family is entitled to the whole property. And others were deprived of the property or the share from the property. So this Islam totally, it was a death blow to this concept of primogeniture, in which others were deprived. Rather, there was the equal distribution of wealth based on the justice system of Islam was ensured and practiced. And this is all some of the basic discussions regarding this was an introduction regarding the law of inheritance, in which we discussed the significance in socioeconomic importance, reformative measures, and also there's some of the concept regarding the law of inheritance. Now, inshallah, in our upcoming sessions, we will discuss the other important aspects like the portions, and then the ayatul miras, the verse of the inheritance, which is mentioned in the Quran, and we also discuss that, and then we discuss the portion and how the property is distributed in Islam. That's actually the main practical part, is the distribution of the wealth, because as I said, that the portion of legatees, portion of inheritors, though it is fixed by the Quran, but the number of inheritors vary from family to the family. In one family you have only males, in other family you have only females, in some family you have the males and females together, other families you don't have anyone at all. Some have the parents and not the children, some have the children, not the parents, some have the siblings, not their children. So the number of the inheritors, as I said, the portion is fixed, but the number of inheritors, it varies from family to family. So we need to understand the proper mechanism of distribution of law of inheritance, and which we inshallah discuss in our upcoming sessions. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us a tawfiq to get benefited of this discipline of knowledge, which is considered to be the half of the knowledge. And we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us a tawfiq to distribute our wealth as is commanded by Allah and is practiced by the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Amin ya rabbal alameen. Subhanallah bihamdihi. Subhanakallahumma bihamdik. Ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun alal mursalin. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam, Ustaz.
Jazakallah khair.